Started. My grandparents got married in 1920. They were 19 years and 17 years old, and I guess we always told them they went on the longest honeymoon ever because they got on a ship. And I was just telling my wife earlier, I kind of shorted you on our honeymoon because my grandfather must have been pretty romantic. He put her on this cruise ship, and they sailed across over to Ellis Island, and then he took her on a train ride all the way across the United States, and they got to see all the scenery and ended up in California, and that's when the whole operation started. And he ended up in 1924, my mom was born, and they were in Cressy, California, up by Livingston. And they were there for a couple years, and then they came back to Tulare, and he partnered up with his brother Frank Pierce, and they were on a little dairy west of town. It's Delphina Perry's old place, and they lived in the same house together and kind of divided the house up between them. And in 1927, my Uncle Joe Pierce was born, and about 4 months later, his first cousin Frank Pierce was born in the same house. And so they remained partners there till, I want to say it was probably 1937 that my grandfather went back to the Azore Islands. So I guess technically they were on about a 17-year honeymoon. And they stayed there for a year, and then when they came back, it would be about 1939 that he bought the original dairy that they started on. And they lived there on the dairy until they bought a piece of property in 1952, and that's when they moved. It was on Avenue 240, right across from where I live today. And before that, before they moved, my mom and dad and my two brothers had been born already, and they were still living all together in the same house. So that was when my mom and dad finally got to live in the house by themselves, because my dad had gone off to the war, and when he got back in 1946 is when my mom and dad got married, and he went to work at Dairyman's Creamery for a number of years, and it would have been in around 51 or 52 that he joined my Uncle Joe and my grandfather in the business. And so they continued on with that until probably the 1960s. There was ground that started coming available, and that was probably the biggest part of the expansion. Through the 60s we were buying some ground, and in the 70s, and my brother Dennis and my brother David and I and my cousin Larry were all working on the farm at the time, any time in between breaks of school and all of that. And we all went to school at Oak Valley Schools, where we started, and then went to Western High School. And we all managed to go to college. My brother David and I both went to Cal Poly, and my brother Dennis went to UCLA, and Larry went to Fresno State. And in 1977, when I graduated from Cal Poly and my cousin Larry was getting out of school, we joined the business at that time. And I guess it was probably 1980, 81 that we became a minority partner in the business, my cousin Larry and I. Yeah, and then as we were growing up too with the dairy, my dad was milking cows and my uncle was on the farm, and that's what we were raised doing, is feeding animals, branding cattle, and irrigating crops and stuff. And that's how we got our start in it. And I kind of remember, seems like the first time I got a salary, I was getting 50 cents an hour, but my brother Dennis claims it was $1 an hour. So I'm kind of thinking maybe because he's an attorney that he might have negotiated a better deal than I did. So I got to find out the truth in this. I'm not really sure what happened there, but I just kind of remember it was taking me 2 hours to make a buck. So times have changed a little bit, but we were out there, little kids, chopping weeds in the cotton, and the cotton was taller than we were, and it was kind of a fun deal. We'd have to play games out there. We'd tromp cotton when they were picking cotton, and playing little games where we'd make holes and cover it up and watch somebody fall in it, and that was fine until one time, which really had nothing to do with this, but Dennis fell in head first, and he was pretty blue by the time my uncle pulled him out. And it it was a close call on that one. So, but at least we can look back and laugh at it now. But my parents were always there for us, no matter what we were doing. You know, they'd milk cows. My mom was the bookkeeper doing all the books. I can remember her, fussing over a penny or two, trying to figure out where she got off. And I go, man, I know, thank God for QuickBooks today, because there's no way that I could ever really do that. But it didn't matter if basketball, football, baseball game, whatever it was, they were always there. My mom keeping score, and we could always count on them. And it was so. In about 1990 is when there was a dairy site that came up for sale, Tony V. Cardoza's place, and we were able to purchase that. Me and my cousin Larry started the dairy there. It was Piers and Mederos Dairy, and we had separate farming operation, which was Oak Valley Farms. And at that time, it kind of made it so that we were able to start splitting the family partnership to a certain degree, because my dad had a dairy that way, my uncle had a dairy, and then Larry and I had a dairy operation plus the farming. We rented all the ground from my dad and my uncle, and continued farming until it was about 1995. My cousin Larry and his dad started looking at an opportunity out of state to maybe move the cows, looking at a better opportunity, and they moved the dairy to South Dakota. So they moved back there, and myself, I'm not too good with cold weather, so there was no way I could move back there. I don't think I could have handled the winters, so I stayed behind, and we farmed and rented out the dairy for a number. And there's always a question with Douglas Farms, because when I write it out, it's spelled D-O-U-G space L-E-S, and everybody thinks I don't know how to spell my name, but with my wife being Leslie, I had to make sure I included her in that. So that's where the Doug Les comes from, and she's been a part of the operation. We got married in 1993, and I was 38 years old at the time, so she had to put up with my stubbornness and my set ways. But we've now been married 24 years, and next year will be 25, and I was just telling her how maybe we can compete with my grandfather's honeymoon trip that he took and do something special for our 25th anniversary. I planted my first trees in 2006 and have done a little bit 2007 and then some more in 2008. And then now 4 years ago I planted some more, which now is on ground that does belong to me. So I wish my mom and dad could be here to see this, because I know they'd be extremely proud. And my aunt and uncle will be here, Joe and Rosie Piers, and my cousin Larry's coming from South Dakota. So, that all means a lot to me. Yeah, I've got 3 kids. I've got Jared Honley, who's 29 years old now, and he works in Visalia with his wife, Jessica. She works at a school, and she's working towards getting her teaching credentials. And have my 2 grandkids, Landon and Adeline Honley. And they're 2 of the cutest kids you'll ever see, and I guess I'm probably a little prejudiced, but I think it's probably true. And I've got my son now he's 21. He was born in 1995, and he's going to COS right now, and it's just been accepted to go to Fresno State, so he'll be going next semester to Fresno State, and we're trying to get an ag degree over there. So hopefully there's still a future in this farming for him to come back to it and continue on, make it a 4th generation. And who knows, maybe it'll be my daughter. She's a senior in high school. She'll be graduating from Tulare Western this year, and she's looking to go to college. She would like to become a psychologist, and I think if she really puts her mind to it and works hard, that there's always that possibility. And who knows, maybe she'll be the one that comes back and decides to farm too. You just never know anymore. So as far as participations on boards, the one I've been the longest on would be the Mid-Valley Cotton Ginners, Cotton Gin, and that's probably been over 20 years, I would say. And that's always an enjoyable one. It's a great group that we have as far as the board, and kind of a lot of like minds. So it makes it an easy board to be on. It's, there's really no turmoil or fighting of any kind, and it's all really, top growers. So I get to learn a lot from the people I'm around there, and it's been a really good experience for me. And probably the one that's means the most to me is being on the board of Oak Valley School. That's since I think 1999, and now I'm president of the board. And kind of the story that goes with that, when I first got on, Jeff Benavides is the one that got me on the board, and he just told me, there's nothing to this. We just meet, and it's just a simple deal. It's nothing to it. So when I went to the first meeting, the room was full of people, and I thought, man, this is quite an honor. They've come here to welcome me to the board. And little did I realize that turmoil that he said never existed started from day one. So we had our first issue right then, and I realized that maybe I got tricked into this one. I don't know, but it's been a great experience, because that's where I started school, and my brothers both went to school there. My cousins both went to school there. So we've got a long history there. My kids have all gone through school at Oak Valley. So anytime I've been able to help with anything there at the school, we've tried our best. My wife was president of the parent club when the kids were there, and she kind of spearheaded a fundraiser that helped the kids get to Disneyland every year, which has been a tradition since I went to school there. In fact, it used to be that we'd have to tromp cotton trailers to earn our money. There'd be farmers that would donate that trailer of cotton to the school for the kids to go to the trip. But the work we did was tromping the trailers. So I was a past director of the Cabrillo Club, and have helped serve beer over the years, which is something that my parents always did. They always were at the fair, and back then it'd be till 2 o'clock in the morning serving beer, counting money, and it was just something they did every year. And when my kids have played sports, I've coached softball and Little League, and then when my daughter and son were in high school with a golf team, I tried to help all I could there. I was an assistant coach with my son's golf team, and a director on the booster club for both the men's and women's golf. Oak Valley School's always been big to me. Whenever I could, we've had some projects where we knew things would be a little tight on the budget. We built a new sports facility in the back, and we were going to have to move the dirt, and we knew the contractor would be pretty high, and I have a laser scraper, so it was an easy deal for me to go over there and get the dirt moved and not have to pay the contractor and everything. So it definitely helped free up some money in the budget. And the other cause has been Happy Trails over the years. I've tried to do some stuff there. When they first opened up their new facility, they were wanting to plant some alfalfa. So we went over there and did some laser work and put up the borders and helped them plant the hay. So it helped them feed those horses for the first 4 or 5 years that they moved over there. And that was something that's a great program they have out there. So the other ones I would really like to acknowledge are the workers I've had. I've got a pair of brothers that have been with me probably, God, I don't even know if they were 20 years old. They've probably been with me for 35 years. And at one time, I think I employed half of the Mancia family, but I've got Jesus and Raul that have been with me for a long time, and great employees. I never have to worry about things. They watch it closer than I do. And then Denosaurus, who was a great friend of mine in high school and has worked off and on for me for probably 30 years too. And this group of guys are what make it possible for me to do some of the stuff that I've done, to be able to watch my kids perform and play in different activities, and not have to worry about if I leave, I know things are going to get done. And like I said, they've always just watched the place, taking care of things. And they probably watch it closer than I do sometimes. And I've just been really fortunate to have these long-term employees. I kind of kid around. The only problem about having long-term employees is we're all getting to be about the same age now. So we're slowing down a little bit, but we're still able to get it done. And as I said earlier, my biggest thanks goes out to my mom and dad. But you know, the other one is my wife, who, like I said, we've been married now for 24 years, and she was the stabilizing factor in my life. You know, at 38 years old, like I said, you get kind of set in your ways. So it was good to have that steadying influence, and then having the kids come along, it really puts your life in perspective and make you look at life completely different. But I've been real fortunate with the family, because my brother Dennis and his wife Kathy, along with my brother David and his wife Mary, we've always been really tight, and still do many things together, and that's really important to us as a family. And then I've got my cousin Larry, who's coming out from South Dakota, and we're only 2 weeks apart, so we grew up like brothers. I was at their house all the time. And my cousin Loretta, who's 2 years younger, she was the bookkeeper. She kind of took over for my mom when she wasn't able to do it anymore. And then I've got my aunt and uncle, Joe and Rosie Pierce, that were kind of like second parents to me. And you know, I've appreciated everything they've been able to do for me. And then you have different people as farmers. I guess you have this tendency to have certain people that you call or go to. And my dad was his brother, Johnny Mederos, and it was always funny, because whenever it would rain, my dad or my uncle Johnny would call, or my brother David, and, you know, how much rain did you get? And that was always kind of a running joke with us, because we always knew they were going to get that call. And now when that happens, I call my cousin Daniel. And so I guess we keep that tradition alive. And the other one is Joey Benavides, and you know, he's another one that I call between him and Daniel, that we're always comparing notes and seeing who's doing what and trying to get information from one another. But it's always good to have somebody that you can talk to, and just to make sure you don't feel like you're doing it all wrong, you know. So these are all people that have meant a lot to me in my life. So